Well, hello there, true crimerers. I don't know what that was about, okay? This is the case known as the Bridgewater 4. Viewer discretion is advised. Carl Bridgewater was born on January 2nd, 1965. And he was born in Stourbridge, which was in England, is in England. Now, at the time of this case, he's only 13 years old, and there really isn't a lot of background, or really much background I can find on this young man. I do know that at the time of this case, he was a paperboy. He would get on his bicycle, and he would go around, and he would, deliver newspapers. His parents' names were Brian and Janet. They were both very, very loving parents. Carl grew up with a brother and a sister who he loved very much. The entire family was just your very typical, all-around, just good family. Didn't really cause any trouble anywhere. The date was 19 September 1978. The location, Stourbridge, which is in West Midlands in England. The specific location was something called Yew Tree Farm. It was a property owned by Mary Poole and Fred Jones. It was a pretty decent-sized property back then. It had a little bit of a farm on it, and it had this main house, brick house. Now, on this particular day, the actual owners and occupants of the home were not there. They were out on vacation, and they didn't have anyone house sitting or anything like that. So, no one was supposed to be in this house. Well, on that date, 19 September 1978, a gunshot rang out. The gunshot came from the main house on Yew Tree Farm. When police arrived, they would enter the home, and they found sitting on the couch a young boy. But he wasn't just sitting there, he was deceased. He had clearly been shot dead. The front door was still open, and there were no other signs of anyone else in the home after they did their, room-to-room, floor-to-floor search. After everything was all clear, they would identify the young boy as 13-year-old Carl Bridgewater. By all accounts, this appeared like he had been shot by some kind of shotgun, and at a fairly close range. Carl was known to be a very, very good paperboy. He would deliver papers to a lot of folks who were elderly, and the couple who lived in this house were older. Carl, for this particular house, he was pretty familiar with the owners of the home. He didn't know they were out of town, though. And a lot of times when this couple had their front door open, Carl would walk up to them and literally just hand them the paper directly instead of just throwing it out the house. So what police believe, based on the fact that the door was still open, was that Carl had entered the home thinking the couple who lived there that he knew was there, and he was just going to hand them the paper. But when police found out that this couple was actually not there and they were on vacation far away from the house, they knew they didn't do this, they figured that Carl may have accidentally stumbled across someone robbing this home. And Carl obviously would have seen these people, and so, which means he would have been able to identify them, and so they believe that he was shot for that reason. In the initial investigation, right from the get-go, one man's name came to the surface, and that was an ambulance driver from that area named Bert Spencer. He actually worked for Corbett Hospital, and he actually was a neighbor to the Bridgewater family, so he knew of, at least, Carl Bridgewater. Witnesses said that in the aftermath of the shooting, when people heard the shot, they also looked out and they saw a van. I guess the van was described as a Vauxhall Viva, and specifically it was blue. People who saw the van, this wasn't like the exact description they gave, but when they described it, that's kind of how they pieced it together what the van may have been. Bert Spencer just so happened to own that exact type of van. Same color and everything. A couple of people actually saw the person behind the wheel of this van driving away or driving down the street from the Yew Tree Farm, and it looked like a man wearing a uniform. Bert Spencer, being an ambulance driver, typically would be in uniform. Bert Spencer also was a known owner of shotguns. To my knowledge, the actual shotgun that killed Carl Bridgewater was not found. He was questioned by police numerous times from the get-go. He denied having anything to do with this murder. And the crime scene itself, other than Carl's body, did not have any physical evidence. They did not recover any fingerprints. They did not recover the murder weapon. They did not recover any trace evidence, shoe prints, footprints, palm prints, hair samples, nothing. They had nothing. So other than the circumstantial evidence of Carl being shot by a shotgun, which many, many, many people owned, and the fact that someone saw a similar van in which Bert drove, they didn't really have anything to actually say, all right, we're going to charge you with this. As they were kind of looking into Bert Spencer, there were other crimes happening in that general area. There was actually a series of robberies going on, people breaking into homes and stealing stuff. Two individuals, James Robinson and Michael Hickey, they had recently committed a robbery at a Tesco supermarket. There was a third person with them, but I don't think that third person was ever actually identified, but they all had guns. This third person had a shotgun, and as the other two were robbing the safe and all that, this other individual was holding people hostage with the shotgun, and at one point he fired around over their heads as like a warning shot to like basically be quiet. About a week after that, James Robinson, Michael Hickey, and Michael's cousin, Vincent Hickey, they robbed a couple at a local farm, an old couple. They burst into the home, armed with shotguns, in disguise, demanding money from the couple. And they stole about 200 pounds worth. What the gentleman, the older gentleman who was the victim, was struck over the head by the end of one of the shotguns. But in this story, no one actually fired around. Another man, an older gentleman named Patrick Malloy, had also been involved in some robberies, and he had associations with the Hickey cousins and James Robinson. Patrick Malloy was actually apprehended due to a robbery, and because police were seeing similarities between these robberies and what likely would have happened with Carl Bridgewater, they started to question Mr. Malloy about, hey, what do you know about the robbery, potential robbery, and the murder of Carl Bridgewater at Yew Tree Farm? What police, it sounded like, wanted people to believe was that Patrick Malloy confessed immediately. But the reality is that Patrick Malloy was questioned, interrogated for hours upon hours upon hours. And eventually they got this basically written confession from him stating that he was in one of the upstairs bedrooms of Yew Tree Farm with three, and the three other people were downstairs searching, and that were the Hickey cousins, Michael and Vincent, and then also James Robinson. He said as he was upstairs, he heard a single gunshot. When he ran downstairs, he saw this young boy on the couch who had just been shot dead. And then all four of the men fled the scene immediately. So at that point, police said, all right, stop looking at Bert Spencer. We've got our people. We know who did this. Case closed. So they arrested Patrick Malloy formally, and then they arrested the three people he named. Those three people were also questioned a lot, and all three of them consistently denied they had anything to do with it. One of them, I guess Vincent Hickey, had acknowledged that at one point they had been at Yew Tree Farm. I don't necessarily know if he was referring to the day of the murder or around that time, because the people who lived there were gone for at least a few days, but didn't actually acknowledge that he was there during the murder and continued to deny he had anything to do with it. All of them did. And even Patrick Malloy eventually started saying, I didn't do it. I just said what they wanted me to say. He was basically trying to tell people that he felt like he was being coerced into confessing. They all went to trial, and their denials didn't matter at all. And also, let me just remind you guys, there was no physical evidence left at the scene to connect any of these four men from even being in that house, let alone committing the murder. There was no physical evidence to put anyone in that house who wasn't supposed to be there, like, the people who live there. There was no evidence to point to a suspect whatsoever. Nothing. So they had to rely on just circumstantial evidence, witnesses who kind of seemed very inconsistent about, maybe we saw some guys running from the house. No one was really sure. So, at trial, after trial, they were all found guilty of their respective charges. James Robinson and Michael and Vincent Hickey, they were convicted of murder. And then Patrick Malloy, due to his confession of saying he wasn't present when the gun was fired, he was convicted of manslaughter. James Robinson and Vincent Hickey were sentenced to life in prison with a minimum requirement of 25 years before they can become paroled. Michael Hickey, because at the time that this was committed, was only 17. When he was convicted, he was about 18 years old. He was sentenced to something I guess called detained indefinitely at Her Majesty's pleasure. Patrick Malloy was sentenced to 12 years, but just 2 years into his sentence, he died in prison. He did suffer a heart attack. The men tried to appeal in 1989. It was rejected. But then, in February of 1997, something completely changed. They found evidence that what Patrick Malloy was basically stating, that his confession was likely coerced, that he was just telling them what police wanted to hear, that was pretty much proven. They found evidence that he didn't even write out the confession. It was a police officer who did. And they used a lot of timing in terms of because everything was time-stamped, and they would question the police who eventually they would admit to writing out the confession, stating that, well, he was just saying exactly he was writing out what Patrick Malloy was saying. But Patrick Malloy was a known, very slow speaker who took a lot of gaps in between sentences, who took a very long time to talk. And the timestamps of this confession was super quick. It was written out in a hurry. So they were able to basically prove that evidence, in particular the confession, was fabricated by police, basically in order to just get someone for this. These four guys fit the bill. They were all robbing places with shotguns. There were witnesses to all of those crimes, and Carl was shot with a shotgun, probably during a robbery, is what they thought. So it just seemed like these were the guys. So, in 1997, all of their convictions were overturned. They were given the options to retry them, but the courts decided not to. The only person they said maybe they could possibly retry was Vincent Hickey, because he had admitted to being at Yew Tree Farm around that time, but they didn't have anything else. They didn't have a confession from him. They didn't have any physical evidence, so they said, we're not going to retry him either. So basically, all three men who were still alive were either released from prison, or if they weren't already, their convictions in general were just overturned. And by December of 1998, all charges against them were dropped. There was going to be no more trials against them. As these men were spending time in prison, a lot of the people in the area kept trying to say the bridge, because the media would refer to them as the Bridgewater Four. Carl Bridgewater, his name, and then the four men convicted, obviously. People were adamant that these four men didn't do it. They were protesting all the time. The Bridgewater Four are innocent. And the public was trying to tell police, we think it was Bert Spencer who did this, the guy who initially they had investigated from the get-go. Well, here's the thing. Just a few months after the Bridgewater Four were arrested for the murder of Carl Bridgewater, Bert Spencer shot and killed a 70-year-old man whose name was Hubert Wilkes. Hubert Wilkes was shot and killed on a sofa, while sitting on a sofa, on a farmhouse property. Carl Bridgewater was shot at a farmhouse property while sitting on a couch by a shotgun that was never recovered. Bert Spencer admitted to doing it. He said, I killed him. So he was sentenced to 15 years in prison for this. And then he was released in 1995. Public opinion was that this was so similar to what happened to Carl Bridgewater that Bert Spencer, his van was seen in the area. The person driving the van was wearing a uniform. He would wear a uniform being an ambulance driver. And one of the reasons why they had basically dismissed Bert Spencer as a suspect was because he supposedly had an alibi for the day and the time that Carl Bridgewater was killed. The alibi came from an ambulance station secretary that worked closely with Bert Spencer, saying that basically he and her were together that whole time frame. Well, years later, she would say, oh, except there was a point where he was gone for lunch for quite some time, and I don't know where he was. Bert and this secretary were actually good friends at the time, so police felt that maybe she was just sort of, without really knowing it, kind of just covering for him. Not intentionally, but just like, oh, he's my friend, I like him, he's a good guy, like, he couldn't have done this. So yeah, he was with me the whole time. But then she would later say, not really. In 2016, there would be a docu-series or documentary basically featuring a long interview with Bert Spencer. Bert also wrote a book called Scapegoat for Murder, essentially saying he was just being labeled a scapegoat for the murder of Carl Bridgewater because he just fit the bill, but he kept saying he was innocent, he didn't do it. Well, I guess in that same documentary, Bert's own daughter would say that she felt he was at Yew Tree Farm that day, that either he killed Carl or he saw who killed Carl. During the same interview, one of Bert's ex-wives would say that the day after Carl was murdered, Bert told her that he had disposed of a shotgun. I guess Bert Spencer was also given this test that determines that he was a manipulative psychopath. But he still repeatedly denied he had anything to do with the murder of Carl Bridgewater. Even though he confessed to the murder of Hubert Wilkes, he would recently say, I have evidence that I didn't do it. He was also the one to kind of bring the Carl Bridgewater story back into the forefront when he wrote his book, kind of putting himself back into it. One of those things where, killers like to kind of put themselves into the investigation sort of thing, But police have no evidence to pin the murder on him. They have a lot of circumstantial stuff, like the fact that secretary lied about the alibi. They have speculation from his daughter and speculation from his ex-wife about throwing away a shotgun that was, again, never recovered. They can't just use what his daughter thinks may have happened. They can't use this, test that was done on him to say, he may be a psychopath. None of that is, hard evidence to say he actually did it. Sure, it looks kind of like he did, especially when you consider that Hubert Wilkes was killed in identical fashion that Carl Bridgewater was killed. But what would his motive be? Why would he follow Carl Bridgewater to this farm property and go in there and kill him? What's his reasoning? Well, that's never really been determined. He doesn't have any history of being a predator, like a child predator, or any sexual assault history, anything like that. So what would his reason be? When you go back to the Bridgewater 4, there's also stuff that really kind of could potentially say one or some of them may have been involved in this because they were committing burglaries. They were confirmed to be committing very similar acts, breaking into places, using a shotgun. They had never actually killed anyone before and never threatened a child before, but it's certainly possible it's happened before where a witness is killed because, well, they were a witness. But again, there's no actual evidence to put them there, and the confession was proven to be essentially falsified. It wasn't real. But then what about one of the Hickey cousins saying, well, I was at that property around that time? Was that even true? It's not really known. And so ultimately what we're left at here in July of 2023 is that no one has actually been convicted officially of the murder of Carl Bridgewater. People were convicted for a time, but then that was reversed. And so technically his murder is still unsolved. And this was 45 years ago. Patrick Malloy has since obviously passed away. He died 2 years into his sentence. James Robinson, one of the Bridgewater Four, he died in 2007 from lung cancer. And from what I understand, the other two men, Michael and Vincent Hickey, are still alive. And from what I understand, Bert Spencer is still alive. But it doesn't sound like there is any evidence to put anyone at trial for this. So unfortunately, it sounds like whoever killed Carl Bridgewater 100% got away with it. We'll never really know why he was killed. Sadly, there's no conclusion to this story. You know, because of how long ago it was, unfortunately, Carl Bridgewater will probably never, ever get justice. Unless a miracle in science breaks through, or someone just outright confesses without any hesitation, without anyone coercing them, just says, all right, I did it. And unfortunately, that is the end of this case. I hope you found it interesting. As usual, if you have tripped, fallen, and stumbled your way into this video, hello, I'm Mike. I tell true crime stories here. Yeah, that was weird. So please subscribe to me here, give this video a like, and if you want to see more short-form true crime stories, follow me over on TikTok. The link is in the link tree in the description of this video below. Next, if you have a case you want me to cover, just email me. It's also listed below. Email me just the name of the person, where it happened, when it happened, and I will eventually add it to my list. I pick my cases that I cover at random, so I can't tell you exactly when I'll cover that one, but I will eventually at some point. If you want to support me in any way, we do sell merch. We sell t-shirts and hoodies and stuff like that. It's linked in the link tree, and we do ship internationally. And then lastly, if you have a Discord account and you want to join my Discord server, it's a very quiet, very chill Discord, but it's also linked in the link tree, and please be over the age of 18 or else you will be kicked out of there. Sorry, not sorry. But that is it for this video. True crime, a Rooney, a Dooney, a ding-dongs. I like ding-dongs. The chocolate, the cream-filled ones. The cream-filled... Okay, wait a minute. The chocolate, the things you, when you, the cream comes out of them, you know, the ding-dongs, that cream comes out when you put them in your mouth. Well, you know what I mean? Like, they're like Twinkies. You know those long things you put in your mouth and the cream could... Shit. Nope. Ding-dongs. You're not... I'm not saying you're ding-dongs. Ding-dong... I'm gay. If you didn't know. Well, this was a very unstable way to say goodbye, but...